What happens when one of the most talked about figures in modern royal history sits down for what was supposed to be a candid conversation, but instead turns into a battle of wills that nobody saw coming? In just 38 seconds, a single comment would send shockwaves through the studio, turning an interview into an unforgettable showdown that had the entire audience gasping. This is the story of how Grace, under pressure, met entitlement head-on, and why one guest walked off set, leaving everyone stunned. The stage was set. The lights were bright. Tamron Hall, a veteran broadcaster known for her warmth, intelligence, and unshakable composure, sat across from Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, who had agreed to what was billed as an intimate discussion about her life, her challenges, and her journey. And the audience settled into their seats. Cameras rolled, and the conversation began. Tamron opened with a smile, her voice steady and welcoming. "Thank you so much for being here today. I know our audience has been looking forward to this conversation. Let's start with something light. How have you been adjusting to life in California?" Meghan leaned back in her chair, a polite smile crossing her face, but there was something in her eyes, something distant. "Well, Tamron, it's been quite the journey. You know, leaving behind everything I knew, everything I built, it wasn't easy. But I think people don't always understand the sacrifices I've made." Tamron nodded, her expression empathetic, but professional. "I can imagine it's been difficult. Many people relate to the idea of making big life changes. What would you say has been the most challenging part?" Meghan paused, tilting her head slightly. "The most challenging part? Honestly, it's been the constant need to explain myself, to justify my choices. I shouldn't have to do that. I'm a grown woman, a mother, and I made the decision that was right for my family. But it feels like everyone wants a piece of me, wants to dissect every move I make." The audience murmured softly. Tamron maintained her composure, her voice calm and measured. "I think what people connect with is hearing authentic stories, and part of that is understanding the why behind the decisions. Can you talk about what specifically drove you to step back from royal duties?" Meghan's smile faded slightly. Her tone shifted, becoming sharper. "I've talked about this before, Tamron, many times. In fact, I've talked about it more than I should have to. It's exhausting, frankly. The same questions, over and over. Don't you think there are more important things we could discuss?" A subtle tension crept into the room. Tamron, ever the professional, didn't miss a beat. "Of course we can talk about whatever you'd like. That's why you're here. What would you prefer to discuss?" Meghan waved a hand dismissively. "I just think the focus should be on the work I'm doing now, the positive change I'm trying to create, not rehashing the past." Tamron leaned forward slightly, her voice still kind, but firm. "I absolutely want to hear about your current work, but I also think our audience is genuinely curious about your journey. It's what connects people to you. So let's talk about both. Tell me about the projects you're passionate about right now." Meghan straightened in her seat, and for a moment, it seemed like the conversation might smooth out. "Well, I've been working on several initiatives focused on women's empowerment and equality. Things that actually matter. Not just photo opportunities or ceremonial appearances." Tamron's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, but her tone remained neutral. "That's wonderful. Can you give us some specifics? What does that work look like on a day-to-day basis?" Meghan hesitated. "Well, it's ongoing. We're in the planning stages for several projects. But these things take time. Real change doesn't happen overnight." Tamron nodded slowly. "Of course. So while those are in development, what have you launched so far that people can support or get involved with?" Meghan shifted in her seat, a flash of irritation crossing her face. "You know, Tamron, I feel like you're trying to corner me here. Like you're trying to catch me in something. Is that what this is?" The audience went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Tamron's expression remained calm, but there was a strength in her eyes. "Not at all. I'm asking the questions I think our viewers want answered. You mentioned your work, and I'm simply asking for details. That's what interviews are for. Meghan crossed her arms. Well, maybe you should trust that I know what I'm doing. I don't need to prove myself to you or to anyone watching. I've already proven more than enough. Tamron took a slow breath, her professionalism unwavering. I'm not questioning your accomplishments. I'm giving you a platform to share them. But if you're not comfortable discussing specifics, we can move on. Let's talk about your family. How are you balancing motherhood with your public life? Meghan's jaw tightened. My children are off limits. I've made that very clear. Tamron raised an eyebrow. I'm not asking about your children specifically. I'm asking about you. How you manage being a mother while also pursuing your goals. Many women relate to that struggle. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You know what, Tamron? I don't think you understand what it's like to be in my position. The scrutiny, the pressure, the constant judgment. You sit here in your comfortable studio, asking your comfortable questions, but you have no idea what I deal with every single day. The audience gasped. Tamron remained seated, her posture composed, her voice steady. I may not know exactly what your experience is, but I do know what it's like to work hard, to face challenges, and to be questioned. That's part of being in the public eye, and I've always approached those moments with grace. Meghan's voice rose. Grace? You want to talk to me about grace? I've shown nothing but grace through everything I've been through. And now I'm supposed to sit here and be interrogated? Tamron stood now, her voice firm, but not harsh. This isn't an interrogation. This is a conversation. And conversations require openness from both sides. I've been nothing but respectful to you. I've asked thoughtful questions. If you feel attacked by basic questions about your work and your life, then perhaps this isn't the right format for you. Meghan's face flushed. Maybe it's not. Maybe I was wrong to think I could have an honest conversation here. You're just like all the rest. You want the drama, the headlines. You don't actually care about me or what I have to say. Tamron shook her head, her voice cutting through the tension with precision. That's not fair, and you know it. I've built my career on honest, thoughtful journalism. I've given you every opportunity to share your truth. But truth requires substance. If you can't provide that, that's on you, not me. The studio fell into a heavy silence. Meghan stared at Tamron, her eyes blazing. You know what? I don't have to listen to this. I don't have to sit here and be disrespected in front of all these people. Tamron's expression didn't waver. No one is disrespecting you. But if you feel that asking you to talk about your work and your choices is disrespectful, then maybe you need to ask yourself why that is. Meghan pointed a finger at Tamron, her voice sharp and biting. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can sit there and judge me? You have no idea what it's like to be me. No idea at all. And frankly, I don't think you ever will. Tamron's voice was calm, almost gentle, but her words were steel. You're right. I'm not you. But I am a journalist, and I am doing my job. If you can't handle being asked questions, then perhaps you shouldn't agree to interviews. Meghan turned toward the exit, her movements sharp and deliberate. That's it. I'm done. This is ridiculous. I came here in good faith, and this is what I get. Unbelievable. Tamron called after her, her voice still even. You're always welcome to come back when you're ready to have a real conversation. Meghan stopped at the edge of the stage, spinning around one last time. A real conversation? You wouldn't know a real conversation if it hit you in the face. You just want sound bites and controversy. Well, congratulations, Tamron. You got your moment. Tamron stood tall, her gaze steady and unwavering. The only moment here is the one you're creating. I asked you to share your story. You chose not to. That's your decision. Meghan scoffed, shaking her head. You're impossible. Absolutely impossible. And with that, Meghan Markle walked off the stage, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving Tamron Hall standing in the center of the studio with an audience in stunned silence. Cameras continued to roll as Tamron slowly returned to her seat, mime, her composure never breaking. Tamron looked directly into the camera, her voice measured and sincere. "We'll be right back after this break." But before the cameras cut away, you could see it. The slightest shake of Tamron's head. Not in anger, not in frustration, but in something closer to disappointment. She had offered a platform, a chance for dialogue, and instead, she had been met with defensiveness and accusations. The audience sat frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. This wasn't a typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This was something else entirely. It was a collision between two very different approaches to public life. On one side, a seasoned professional who believed in accountability, transparency, and the responsibility that comes with a platform. On the other, someone who seemed to expect deference without explanation, admiration without effort. As the break began and the studio lights dimmed slightly, members of the audience turned to each other, whispering. Some looked shocked, others looked confused. A few nodded knowingly, as if they had expected something like this all along. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled. This was live television, and what had just happened was completely unscripted. No one had anticipated a walkout. No one had prepared for a guest to turn hostile over questions that, by any standard, were fair and reasonable. Tamron, meanwhile, took a quiet breath and sipped from a glass of water handed to her by a stage assistant. Her face betrayed no emotion. She had been in this business long enough to know that moments like these, as uncomfortable as they were, revealed character. And in this case, the contrast couldn't have been clearer. The exchange had started innocently enough. A simple question about adjusting to life in California. But from there, it spiraled. Every question Tamron asked was met with resistance. Every attempt to dig deeper was interpreted as an attack. It was as if Meghan had arrived expecting softball questions and unconditional praise, and when she didn't receive it, she couldn't handle it. What made it even more striking was Tamron's response. She never raised her voice. She never lost her cool. She simply stood her ground. She asked the questions her audience deserved answers to, and when those questions were deflected or dismissed, she didn't back down. She didn't apologize for doing her job. She didn't coddle or placate. She remained professional, poised, and principled. When the show returned from break, Tamron addressed the audience directly. "As you just saw, our guest decided to leave. I want to be clear about something. This show has always been a space for honest, respectful conversation. We ask tough questions because we believe our guests and our audience deserve more than surface-level talk. If that's uncomfortable for some, I understand. But I won't apologize for it." The audience erupted into applause. It wasn't polite, obligatory clapping. It was genuine, enthusiastic support. They had witnessed something rare. Someone in a position of influence, refusing to be bullied or manipulated. They had seen Tamron stand firm in the face of entitlement, and they respected her for it. Tamron smiled softly, a hint of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you. Now, let's move forward. And we have other incredible guests joining us today, and I promise you, the conversation is just getting started." And just like that, the show continued. Tamron transitioned seamlessly into the next segment, her professionalism unshaken. But the moment had already been cemented. The walkout, the confrontation, the raw tension. It was the kind of television that people would talk about for days, weeks, maybe even years. What had started as a simple interview had turned into something much bigger. It became a lesson in how to handle pressure, how to maintain integrity, and how not to let someone else's discomfort dictate your actions. Tamron had shown what it meant to be a true professional. She had shown what it meant to respect your audience enough to ask real questions, even when those questions weren't easy. Meghan, on the other hand, had shown something else. She had revealed a brittleness, a defensiveness that suggested someone who wasn't used to being challenged, someone who expected to control the narrative, to dictate the terms, to be treated with kid gloves. And when that didn't happen, she crumbled. The contrast was stark. Tamron, with years of experience, with a reputation built on hard work and credibility, remained calm and collected. Meghan, despite all her talk of resilience and strength, couldn't handle a few straightforward questions. It was a masterclass in the difference between true confidence and fragile ego. As the show wrapped up, Tamron signed off with her usual warmth. Thank you all for being here today. Remember, real conversations aren't always comfortable, but they're always worth having. See you tomorrow. The cameras stopped rolling. The lights dimmed. The audience filed out, still buzzing with energy and disbelief. And Tamron Hall, ever the professional, gathered her notes, thanked her team, and prepared for the next day. Because for her, this wasn't about drama. It wasn't about creating a viral moment. It was about doing her job with integrity, no matter who was sitting across from her. And in that moment, she had done exactly that. The interview that was supposed to be a platform for Meghan to share her story had instead become a testament to Tamron's strength. It had become a reminder that respect is earned, not demanded. That grace under pressure is a choice. And that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand your ground. In those 38 seconds, when Meghan accused Tamron of trying to corner her, when she stood up and pointed her finger, when she declared that Tamron had no idea what it was like to be her, she revealed everything. She revealed that beneath the polished exterior, beneath the carefully crafted image, there was someone who couldn't handle being questioned. Someone who couldn't handle not being in control. And Tamron, in her response, revealed the opposite. She revealed someone who understood that being in the public eye comes with responsibility. That having a platform means being willing to explain yourself, to be vulnerable, to engage in real dialogue. She revealed someone who wouldn't compromise her principles for the sake of keeping a difficult guest happy. It was a moment that would be replayed over and over, analyzed, dissected, debated. Some would defend Meghan, saying the questions were too invasive, too pointed, but most would see it for what it was. A guest who came unprepared to have an actual conversation, who expected to be treated like royalty even after walking away from that life, and who couldn't handle a host who refused to play along. Tamron had offered respect. She had offered a platform. She had offered the chance for Meghan to define her own narrative, to share her truth, to connect with an audience that was genuinely curious. And Meghan had thrown it all away because she couldn't handle being asked to back up her words with substance. This wasn't just a talk show moment. This was a cultural moment. It was a reminder that no matter how famous you are, no matter how much sympathy you've garnered, you still have to show up. You still have to engage. You still have to be willing to answer questions if you're going to sit down for an interview. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't be doing interviews at all. The tension in the room had been building from the very first exchange. Looking back, there were signs. The way Meghan settled into her chair, the slight edge in her voice when she answered that opening question about California, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. These were all hints that this conversation was going to be different. Tamron, to her credit, had noticed. She had decades of experience reading people, understanding body language, sensing when an interview was about to go sideways. But she also had faith in the process. She believed that if she asked good questions and created a safe space, people would open up. She believed in the power of honest conversation. But Meghan had come with a different agenda. She had come expecting to be celebrated, not questioned. She had come expecting sympathy, not scrutiny. And when the interview didn't go according to her plan, when Tamron refused to simply nod and agree, everything fell apart. The moment when Meghan said, "Don't you think there are more important things we could discuss?" was particularly revealing. It wasn't just dismissive, it was condescending. It suggested that Tamron, a highly respected journalist with a successful career, didn't know how to do her job, that she was wasting time with trivial questions when there were bigger issues at stake. But Tamron knew better. She knew that understanding someone's journey, understanding their choices, wasn't trivial. It was essential. It was the foundation for everything else. You can't talk about the work someone is doing without understanding why they're doing it, how they got there, what drives them. Those questions weren't distractions. They were the whole point. When Tamron pivoted to asking about specific projects and initiatives, she was doing exactly what any good journalist would do. She was asking for concrete examples. She was asking for evidence. Because talk is cheap. Anyone can say they're working on important things. But proving it, showing it, backing it up with real action, that's where the rubber meets the road. And Meghan couldn't do it. Or wouldn't. When pressed for details, she became vague. We're in the planning stages. These things take time. It's ongoing. These were non-answers. They were deflections. And Tamron recognized them immediately. That's when the accusation came. "I feel like you're trying to corner me here." It was a defensive move, a way to shift the blame onto Tamron instead of taking responsibility for not having substantial answers. It was a tactic often used by people who aren't prepared, who don't have the goods to back up their claims. Tamron's response was masterful. She didn't get defensive. She didn't apologize. She simply stated the truth. "I'm asking the questions I think our viewers want answered." It was a reminder that this wasn't about her. It wasn't about Meghan. It was about the audience. It was about the people who had tuned in expecting to learn something, to gain insight, to connect with a public figure they were curious about. But Meghan wasn't interested in the audience. She was interested in herself, in protecting her image, in maintaining control. When Tamron suggested moving on to talk about family and motherhood, Meghan immediately shut it down. "My children are off limits." But Tamron hadn't asked about the children. She had asked about Meghan's experience as a mother. There's a difference. The distinction mattered. One is invasive. The other is personal, but fair game for someone who has built a public persona around being a mother, around advocating for women and families. If you're going to make those things part of your brand, you have to be willing to talk about them in a meaningful way. When Meghan stood up, when she declared that Tamron had no idea what it was like to be in her position, she crossed a line. She made it personal. She attacked Tamron's credibility, her experience, her understanding. And she did it in front of a live audience, in front of cameras. Tamron could have fired back. She could have listed her accomplishments, her struggles, but she didn't. Because that would have been stooping to Meghan's level. Instead, she took the high road. "I am a journalist, and I am doing my job." It was simple. It was direct. It was true. The final moments, as Meghan walked toward the exit, as she turned back to deliver one last jab, were painful to watch. There was desperation in her voice, a need to have the last word, but all it did was make her look smaller. You just want sound bites and controversy. The accusation rang hollow, because anyone watching could see that Tamron had been nothing but professional. She had asked thoughtful questions. She had listened. She had tried to facilitate a real conversation. If there was controversy, it was because Meghan created it, not because Tamron provoked it. When Tamron said, "The only moment here is the one you're creating," it was the truth laid bare. Meghan was the architect of this disaster. She had chosen to be defensive instead of open. She had chosen to attack instead of engage. She had chosen to walk away instead of showing up. The audience's reaction when the show came back from break spoke volumes. They didn't applaud politely. They applauded passionately. They were cheering for Tamron because they had witnessed someone refusing to be intimidated, someone refusing to compromise their integrity. As the show moved forward, as Tamron interviewed other guests with the same professionalism, it became clear that this moment hadn't rattled her. She had simply absorbed it, processed it, and moved on. Because for her, it wasn't personal. It was professional. The lesson here wasn't complicated. It was about accountability. It was about showing up prepared. It was about understanding that when you agree to an interview, you're entering into a contract with the audience and the interviewer to be honest, to be real, to be vulnerable. Meghan broke that contract. She came expecting special treatment and left when she didn't get it. Tamron honored that contract. She came prepared to ask real questions, and she did, regardless of the consequences. That's the difference. In the end, the story was about what happens when entitlement meets professionalism, when ego meets integrity, when someone who expects the world to bend to their will encounters someone who refuses to bend at all. Tamron Hall walked away from that interview with her reputation intact, her principles uncompromised, and her audience's respect firmly in place. Meghan Markle walked away, having revealed more about herself in 38 seconds than she probably intended. And that is what people will remember. The moment when everything became crystal clear,